Welcome back to Two Sisters and a TV, the classic TV podcast where we remember and discuss and reflect upon all things and everything classic TV. Today, I want to take a look at I want to do an episode. We want to do kind of a rebuttal to a video I ran across on YouTube a couple of nights ago. The video is pretty easy to find. If you do a search on Google, it'll pop up, or a search on YouTube, you'll find it. Basically, the title of the video is Don Knotts was, quote unquote, horrible on Three's Company. And of course, I'm just going to jump into this right away. No sense in trying to, beat around the bush or do a whole bunch of extra, lip service about it. I vehemently disagree with the opinion. Now, the one who created the video included a quote directly from Andy Griffith, because Andy Griffith is the one who said this. Andy felt that Don was not a good fit at all on Three's Company. And of course, Andy definitely was entitled to his opinion. I just happen to disagree with it, because Don Knotts was one of the best things that ever happened to Three's Company. Now, Three's Company, of course, was already an established bona fide hit show when he came along in the fall of 1979. He joined the show in the fourth season after the Ropers departed the show that previous spring of 1979 to go and do their spinoff show, The Ropers. You couldn't have Three's Company without having a landlord, so the producers got the idea they wanted someone like Don Knotts. And then they thought about it again and figured, well, why don't we just go ahead and get Don Knotts? Because by 1979, Don Knotts was not doing a whole lot of acting. I mean, his acting was pretty sporadic. He wasn't doing anything really steady. He was appearing. He was in some Disney movies. He was in Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. Of course, the Apple Dumpling Gang. I think there was a sequel as well to the Apple Dumpling Gang that he was in, and also Gus. He did some episodes of Love Boat, but he wasn't really acting on a regular, consistent, steady basis. So he was available when he was offered the part on Three's Company, and he jumped at the chance, because this meant not only financial security, being on a weekly successful TV show that's good, steady work and good, steady money. But that's what acting is all about. It's staying current, it's staying out there, and it's continuing to move on from, get that next job, get that next gig. So he was very excited to join this very successful show because, of course, in 1979, Three's Company was one of the top 10 shows on television. Very successful, very popular, and he knew this was going to be a good fit for him. Now, Andy, of course, and Don, very good friends. They were lifelong friends. But Andy, I believe, and I'm speculating, this is something that I can't confirm, I'm just speculating this. I think that Andy felt that Don should have really not been on any current TV shows. That's what I think. I think he felt that he should have just, kept TV, limited it to the Griffith Show, and that should have been it. Because Andy didn't care for any of the current shows on TV in the late 70s. All the sitcoms, he just didn't care for any of them. He didn't think that they were on the same level as the Griffith Show, and he basically preferred television of the nature of the Griffith Show, and by 1979, there was not a lot of it around anymore. The only TV shows I can think of that even come close would be The Waltons and Little House on the Prairie. The other shows of the day, like Taxi, Happy Days, that of course that included Ron Howard, but still, I don't think he was a big fan of it either. The Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, WKRP in Cincinnati, Laverne and Shirley, and Three's Company. He didn't care for any of these shows. He felt that they just were not good enough for Don Knotts to be a part of. So when Don decided to join Three's Company, I know that didn't sit very well with him, because honestly, he felt that Don probably took some steps down, took a step back or two by becoming a part of a modern day sitcom. But again, Don and Andy were very good friends. They were lifelong friends, and he needed to realize that his friend was looking out for his career as well as his financial position, and you really could not fault him for that. So, of course, Don was hired to be the brand new landlord to the kids, Jack, Jan, and Chrissy. He was going to be Mr. Furley, Mr. Ralph Furley. He thought he was a ladies' man, but he really was not. He really was the kind of character who was adorable, but he, was kind of seen as though he was like the lovable loser, really. But I mean, I adored Mr. Furley. I still do. I mean, there are debates about who is better, Mr. Roper or Mr. Furley. I like them both. But I must say, when Don Knotts came to Three's Company, I actually happened to run across the very first episode that included Mr. Furley on YouTube. It's titled The New Landlord. And he was just so good in that episode. And after that, I watched several other episodes. I watched several of the early Mr. Furley episodes. I hadn't seen them in a while, so I watched them all on YouTube. But by the way, they're in their entirety. They're uncut, no commercials. And so, that was a lot of fun to be able to watch those again. And the very beginning of Don Knotts' time on Three's Company, there was just something magical about it. Something just really extra funny and hilarious. There was just a sense of extra joy when Don Knotts first came to the show. Now, when Don actually did first come to the show, he found the whole environment of working on Three's Company very intimidating, very stressful. He really was pretty overwhelmed, and here's why. On the Griffith Show, well, the environment was way more relaxed. I mean, the setting was way more kind of they worked a lot, of course, like you do on any TV show, but the pace was very tranquil, very laid back, much more calm. On Three's Company, the pace was accelerated. I heard Don mention this in the True Hollywood story on Three's Company, which they did back in the late 90s, around 1998. 1999, that was one thing he had to really get used to, was how fast-paced that show was. The tapings and the rehearsals and blocking, the read-throughs was a very accelerated schedule, one he just wasn't used to. And then on the Griffith Show, well, they didn't tape before a live studio audience, but Three's Company did. Also on the Griffith Show, well, they only taped and filmed that show before one camera. By 1979, the 3-camera format was firmly in place by that point, so they filmed with 3 cameras, and that too was a big adjustment for him. And then not only was he the brand new kid on the block on the show, and he of course no doubt was wondering, well, how am I going to be accepted by the viewers, the audience? The Ropers were very popular. The show itself very popular, and then you have a brand new character coming in here. Well, that's always an issue that you think about when you come into an established TV show. Am I going to be accepted? Or are the viewers going to reject me? I mean, take the Griffith Show. When Don Knotts left, Barney Fife left the show in 1965, and then you had Warren come on there for a season. Well, people still to this day berate Warren, who was portrayed by Jack Burns. Warren just was not funny. They had done better going and getting Jerry Van Dyke to take Don Knotts' place, because Jerry Van Dyke was I think he was in the last episode of the 1964-65 season. He portrayed Jerry. Really funny episode. I think his dad or his mom was a friend of Aunt Bee's, and he was working over there at the sheriff's office and making all kinds of blunders and mistakes. He would have been a better fit than Jack Burns. I wish they'd have gone that direction. Maybe they did try to go in that direction. Maybe Jerry Van Dyke turned that down, like he turned down the part of Gilligan on Gilligan's Island. I'm not sure. But Warren was just a disaster on the Andy Griffith Show, and that's why he only lasted for a season. So that's the thing. That no doubt was also on Don's mind. How is this going to work out? And also, when he joined the cast, Three's Company, he became the oldest cast member on the show. All of the principal cast members, all the others, were relatively significantly younger than he was. Like when the Griffith Show was on the air, well, they were all kids. They were all in high school and junior high. So he was, of course, the oldest cast member. So all of these factors really had him pretty much he was a bundle of nerves. He was really stressed out. But the cast, the crew, the producers, everyone welcomed him with open arms. They were all so happy that he was there. They respected him and his talent. They knew he was a multi-Emmy winning actor, and they had a lot of appreciation for the fact that he was joining the show. So they did everything they could to make him comfortable, to help him to relax, to get used to the format, to get used to the setting, to get used to the pace and the schedule. He couldn't have asked for a better group of people to work with. Also later on during his time on Three's Company, because of course Don stayed with the show until it ended in 1984, he began to have some problems with his vision. He actually had to have eye surgery at one point. That's why you didn't see Mr. Furley for, several episodes at one point. I'm not sure which season this was, but I believe it was somewhere in the early 80s when this happened. Again, the cast, the crew, everyone came together to really help Don during that time, to help him before and after he had his surgery. When he was going through this issue, they were very accommodating, very supportive. They were absolutely wonderful to him. So he definitely joined a show full of really good people. And after that first episode, his very first episode, Meet the Landlord, or the New Landlord, I think that really, after that he got that episode under his belt, got that behind him. And of course, word has it that he got a standing ovation when when the episode was, when they were done filming before the live studio audience, got a standing ovation. So I think that all of that really helped him to kind of calm down, and he began to find his groove within, working on the show. And I think he was able to go ahead and just kind of, fall simply into place. But Don, of course, Mr. Furley, hilariously funny character. He was so funny. Just his facial expressions alone, just his body language, the way he would say things, and that wardrobe. They hired a special wardrobe person to specifically pick out Mr. Furley's clothes. So he was, like I said, a wonderful addition to the show. Now, a lot of people, I've noticed that, I mentioned this in the Three's Company episode. If you haven't listened to it, by all means, check it out. It's longer than what this one is going to be because I had so much, territory to cover. That show was on for 8 years and there was a lot to talk about. But there are people who debate about which character is funnier, Barney Fife or Ralph Furley. And I've noticed that basically it's a generational divide because there are people who, even on this video I'm talking about, which I didn't finish watching, by the way, because as I kept watching it, I was getting more and more annoyed with it. I think it was basically someone who didn't like Three's Company, who preferred the Griffith Show, and they put the video out there. That's what it sounded like to me, so I didn't finish it. But I did go down and look at the comments, and sure enough, I saw, you had half of the people saying, well, I never watched Three's Company. Three's Company wasn't funny. Mr. Furley was over the top and he wasn't funny. Then you had the others who were saying, oh, well, I never liked the Griffith Show. I've never seen an episode of the Andy Griffith Show. It was boring. I like Mr. Furley better. Three's Company is better than the Andy Griffith Show. So you have a generational divide. Those who grew up in the 60s who watched the Griffith Show, they're always going to say that Barney Fife was the funnier one of the two. Those who grew up in the 70s and 80s, the Gen Xers, are going to say, well, Mr. Furley was the funnier one. Now, as for me, I like them both, but I have to admit I do have more of a partiality toward Mr. Furley. Because yes, that is when I was growing up. Yes, I watched Three's Company in its original run every Tuesday night on ABC. And so, yeah, I'm going to definitely go with Mr. Furley. He does have an edge. So I guess I'm a part of the generational divide as well myself. The only thing is that I don't get into debates about it. I don't fight with people on YouTube. I don't fight about it on Facebook. I stay out of those discussions because they can really get ugly. They can really get negative, and they can really, you can start to hit below the belt. And I just don't think it's worth it. It takes the fun out of all of it because I like the Andy Griffith Show. And of course, I love Three's Company. The Griffith Show, I must say, one of the best TV shows of all time. Perfectly written, directed, wonderful cast. And yes, I do like the black and white seasons the best, which I think most people do. It's funny because the show ran until 1968. It ran for 8 seasons on CBS. But when the show was currently on the air during its run, even during the color seasons, it was still a top-rated show. When it ended in 1968, it was the number one show in the country. But time has definitely changed that, because now people tend to dismiss the color episodes. They don't really care for them. They prefer the black and white ones with Barney. And not only Barney, but Gomer Pyle and Otis. And then you have Peggy, who a lot of people prefer Peggy to Helen. And of course, Opie was the cutest little thing when the show first started. So a lot of people prefer the black and white episodes, which is why MeTV only shows the black and white episodes of the Andy Griffith Show. They show the Griffith Show Monday through Friday nights, 8 to 9 Eastern Time. They show 2 episodes back to back. They do not go past the Barney Fife era. They only show from 1960 to 1965. Now, why did Don Knotts leave the Griffith Show? Well, Andy decided at the very beginning the show would only run for 5 years. That was his plan. So Don, of course, wanted to keep working. Man wanted to, like I said, keep acting, keep working. The man wanted to keep making money. And so he signed a movie deal. He signed with one of the studios. And so he was going to be making movies. Well, then Andy decides around 1964, 65, well, hey, the show is going well and, I'm enjoying it and we're all having a good time with it. Let's leave it on for a little while longer. Let's leave it on for a few more years. Well, Don, by that point, couldn't get out of his movie contract, so he had to leave at that point. So, of course, he left at the end of the 1964-65 season. He did go back for several guest appearances. He won an Emmy Award for one of those appearances. As a matter of fact, he won 5 Emmys for the role of Barney Fife. So, again, I love the Andy Griffith Show. It's a charming show. It's heartwarming, and it's really funny at the same time. But again, I am more partial to Three's Company because, again, that was my childhood. That was a show that I grew up with, and we tend to be more partial to the shows that we grew up with, that we remember watching in their original run week after week, year after year. That's just kind of a given. But Andy, of course, entitled to his opinion, but I just don't agree with it. As a matter of fact, Andy got Matlock, of course, in 1986, and then Don later on down the road during the show's run appeared as his neighbor, Les Calhoun, for a while. Just like with everything else I've ever seen of Don Knotts, I loved the character of Les. He was really funny, and he was a great addition to the show. However, when they were taping, Andy would get so exasperated with Don. He'd get so mad, and he would just get so angry and start freaking out on the set when they were taping. And he would just tell Don, take it down, take it down, take it down. You're overacting. You're on Three's Company too long. Well, Three's Company, especially as the show continued to go on year after year, Three's Company became a very animated TV show. In the beginning, like in the first season, it was not as animated. It was always hilariously funny. It's very groundbreaking, a guy living with 2 girls, yet there's nothing going on between any of them or amongst any of them. But as time went on, really the dynamic of the show did begin to shift. I mean, for example, take the physicality of the show. In the early years, John Ritter was not really doing a whole lot of physical comedy. But I would say by probably the 3rd season, that began to change. And then he began to do a lot of physical comedy and became known as one of the best physical comedians of all time. And all the characters began to get more animated and began to overact, because that's just kind of the show that it was. That's the direction that it went in, where all of the characters were way more animated and they all overacted, and that was just the way that it was. As a matter of fact, I think another reason why Andy might have been, again, this is speculation. I have not read this anywhere. These are just my thoughts. Now, we all know that Don Knotts and John Ritter had amazing chemistry on TV. They were wonderful together on Three's Company. Before I forget, there is a really funny video on YouTube where Don Knotts made a cameo on John Ritter's final TV show, 8 Simple Rules. There was a spoof of Three's Company. John's character, Paul, portrayed Mr. Roper. He wakes up and realizes he had a nightmare. He thinks he's in bed with his wife, but he winds up in bed with Don Knotts. I saw that the other night, and it was hilarious. I think I watched it like 5 or 6 times. It was so funny. So it's wonderful that they were back on camera, on screen together just one more time. I think either that year or the next year, John passed away. So it's great that they were on TV together just one more time. But everyone knows that Don Knotts and John Ritter were great together on TV. Some people claim that their chemistry rivals that of Andy Griffith and Don Knotts. And some have even said that it surpasses the chemistry of Don Knotts and Andy Griffith. Well, you can be sure that Andy Griffith knew about this. He heard about this. And I have a feeling that he didn't appreciate it, didn't like it. No doubt this is something that stepped on his toes, maybe just a little bit, but you can be sure that it definitely is something that he found to be offensive. So I think that's one reason why he too felt the way that he did about Don's character. The only complaint I have about Mr. Furley on Three's Company is I wish they would have given him a steady girlfriend. The way that Barney on the Griffith Show had Thelma Lou, I wish they'd have given, Mr. Furley a steady girlfriend. That'd have really been funny. Some kind of recurring character that would pop in and out, kind of like Mr. Angelino or Felipe, the way that they were not regular characters, but they were recurring characters. That would have been really funny. Actually, I would have loved to have seen Mr. Furley and Lana get married. That'd have been hilariously funny because you can be sure that Lana would have been the one wearing the pants in the marriage. She'd have been bossing Mr. Furley around, would have had him wrapped completely around her little finger. That would have been so funny. And it would have been like a different take on how the Ropers were too. That's another thing. So either the producers and the writers didn't think of this, or they thought about it and scrapped the idea, but that would have been so funny to have seen that. And interestingly enough, the actress who portrayed Lana, Ann Wedgeworth, did say after her time on Three's Company came to an end that the best part about it for her was working with Don Knotts. So again, this is not in any kind of a way an episode to throw any kind of shade toward Andy Griffith. Not at all. But when I saw the video and I saw the comments, I decided we got together and we decided, well, let's go ahead and put out an episode sharing how we feel. And that's how we both happen to see it. Don Knotts was a fantastic addition to Three's Company. That was one of those cast additions that you're so happy that it happened. You're so glad that, this particular cast addition took place. Well, that's how we feel about Don Knotts. He brought a lot to the show. He brought a lot of extra hilarity and humor and talent to the show, because, Mr. Furley was, like I said, he was just absolutely, not only, again, back to the comparison between Mr. Roper and Mr. Furley. Mr. Roper, maybe things would have changed had the Roper stayed on the show. But Mr. Roper kind of had a barrier with the kids upstairs. He had that landlord barrier between he and them. Mr. Furley became more of a friend. In the beginning, he had the barrier as well, but over time, he really became a close friend to the kids, and vice versa. Like when Jack needed money to help him, to help open Jack's bistro, to help him pay his rent, Mr. Furley gave it to him. So that is one thing that I like about Mr. Furley, is the fact that he became such good friends with the kids. And like I said, the kids became very close to him as well. Like in the last episode, when he was saying goodbye to the kids, one of the things that Janet said to him was, "I love you, Mr. Furley," which was so touching, still touching to this very day. So again, we just wanted to put this episode out there, and just kind of give our thoughts about how we feel about Don on Three's Company. Of course, the entire series of the Andy Griffith Show is available on DVD, as well as the entire series of Three's Company is available on DVD. You can see both TV shows every weeknight. You can see the Andy Griffith Show Monday through Friday on MeTV. You can see Three's Company on Antenna TV Monday through Friday night. I think it also might be airing on the weekends, but I'm not sure what time. So, don't quote me on that, but I do know it's on weeknights. I watch it whenever I get a chance to do so. But yeah, that's going to wrap up the episode. Just wanted to, like I said, kind of piggyback off of that video. And we want to do an episode, kind of pay tribute to Don Knotts and the fantastic job he did on Three's Company, and how Mr. Furley was making us laugh back in 1979. And he's still making us laugh today in 2022. So kudos to Don Knotts and Mr. Furley. And that's going to wrap it up. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week. We're looking forward to what we're going to get together for you next time. So stay tuned for that. And until that time, we'll see you all then.